Welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast, addressing all aspects of the digital enterprise, inspiring connection without boundaries and creation without limits. Thank you for tuning in. Here are your hosts, Thom Singer and Craig Brown.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Thank you for selecting this podcast because there are like 2 million podcasts that have been created, and yet here you are. And this show was designed to be a resource for those who work in and around PLM. The Digital Enterprise Society, it is a forum for the exchange of ideas surrounding the tools, processes, and practices used across the product lifecycle. To learn more, visit digitalenterprisesociety.org. My name is Thom Singer, and I have the honor to co-host this show every single week with Craig Brown. Now, Craig is an industry veteran and former PLM leader at General Motors. Hey, Craig, thanks for being here again.
Glad to be here, Thom. We're going to stretch the definition of PLM today to include something called ERP. We'll get into what it is in a second. And some of our listeners know, I'm sure, but PLM so often talks about product development and how to manufacture it. And we tend not to talk about the rest. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about the rest.
That's good. Well, you know what? There's no rules here, Craig. We can stretch. We can stretch to wherever we want to go when we have an interesting guest. And today we have an interesting guest, as we do every single week. Today we have Sam Gupta, and he is the principal consultant and CEO at ElevatIQ. And what he does is he helps businesses with their growth journey. He helps them create strategies for business systems so that they can go out and get bigger. And isn't that what a lot of companies want to do? So Sam, welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Thom and Craig. I'm super excited to talk to you and your listeners.
Well, good. Well, we're glad to have you here. I got to tell you, Craig and I have been doing this show for over 2 years, and it's a lot of fun. So today we're just going to have a really good chat. Really quick, Sam, what's your background? How did you get started in doing what you do?
Yeah, so I will make it super brief because I have been around the block for roughly 20 years. It could get a little longer. So I grew up in a very manufacturing, distribution-centric environment. My family had that business and then went for engineering. It spent roughly, 10, 12 years in the Fortune 500 consulting, designing the enterprise systems for companies that were really struggling to grow. But that was really in the Fortune 500 space. But then I got involved with these startups. So last 10 years have been really around these startups, explored many different ideas. In the first 5 years, the last 5 years have been really focusing on ElevatIQ. And ElevatIQ's focus is really focusing on small to medium-sized businesses, primarily manufacturing. And what we really do is anything and everything related to ERP, but I cannot do ERP without PLM, especially if I am talking to a manufacturing business. So this is going to be super exciting.
So Sam, welcome. This is the reason I wanted you to come chat with us about your focus is on small and medium-sized manufacturers. And when we started the Digital Enterprise Society a few years ago, the evolution of PLM world, we thought the board then, and I was a member of that group of folks, we thought we were underserving smaller companies. Large manufacturers had PLM initiatives. They had their logistics back office, which is enterprise resource planning, ERP. And what we thought was that, there were just pockets of people using digital tools, PLM and otherwise, in small and medium manufacturers. So you've got this interest. You've been working at it for a few years. And we probably ought to start with the definition, just in case we've got a listener or two that doesn't know what the acronyms mean. Define for us enterprise resource planning, and what's its scope? Is it, tell us how far it goes or how small it is.
Yeah, so the best way to sort of define, so I'll first expand the acronym itself. It stands for Enterprise Resource Planning. So what we are looking for is all of the resources. When we think about the manufacturing companies, the resources could be anything and everything that goes in building your products. So it could be the inventory, it could be the equipment, the machines, labor as well, but again, we don't really do the human resources planning as such in your ERP system. So the best way to think about ERP system, and the way I like to think, is it's supposed to be your financial or operational glue for your company. ERP is not good at everything. It is good at a lot of things. And the way I like to think is, an average enterprise is going to have roughly 300 to 600 different business processes. It could be your order to cash, procure to pay. There are just too many different processes there, right? So ERP is going to do a lot of them, but not everything.
Well, and this is a really small company. Their original ERP is somebody who has the skill at organizing lists of things,
yeah,
and then knows how to order parts to get them into the plant, or raw material if you're building something from scratch, and then knows how to deliver them to customers, right?
Yeah.
And that works great when you're a small manufacturer, really small, and you got a few hundred pieces coming in and you ship a few hundred pieces out.
Yeah.
Where people tend to fall down then is, okay, they get bigger and they start to scale. And then they're like, well, maybe I just need Excel or some access database. And it's surprising to me, even today, how many mid-sized companies are running their ERP on some small relational database. So this leads me to this question. In PLM, we kind of gone through this journey about, we really need state-of-the-art CAD tools and management tools and so on. Yeah. And there's a lot of people out there that do them. ERP, it feels like you got to go swallow the big SAP pill, if you will, if you want to do computer-based systems for ERP. And I'm curious, do you share that misconception, or how would you help a small company go from that local expert to some computer-based ERP system?
Yeah, so I don't think SAP is the only ERP system out there. There are a lot of different vendors, and they all are equally good overall from the ERP perspective. There is always going to be a journey overall when you look at, the company, when they go from a point in growth to a next point. That could be 5 million to 10 million to 25 million to 50 million to 100 million. So depending upon where you are, I think one of the things that we notice overall from the misconception perspective that you mentioned related to ERP, even though a company may be using an ERP or the accounting system, okay, sometimes the usage inside the organization is going to be fairly limited. So even though they might have a very sophisticated ERP system, let's call it SAP, okay, but their scheduling is still going to be done, let's say, on the spreadsheet. A lot of other processes that may be done by the ERP, but the adoption is still going to be very low. So they might be paying a lot for the licensing of the system, but they are not necessarily utilizing that inside the company. So doesn't matter what kind of system you are using. Number one thing that you need to do is how to increase the adoption of the existing system.
So what prevents the adoption? Is it fear? Is it, I don't know, skills? I mean, why is it so hard to adopt? I agree with you that adoption is a big deal, but in your experience, what are the real issues that slow down adoption?
So in our experience, when we look at let's say the last 15 or 10 engagements that we have done, in some cases, or maybe in most cases, the challenge was the way system was designed. So ERP system is meant to be a platform, okay? It's supposed to design your business processes the way your business is supposed to be done. But typically the implementation team comes in, they don't necessarily understand the business. They are not really simplifying the business. They are not mapping the business processes in the way the business is supposed to be done. And then it just feels as if the system was never designed for the business. And then people just cannot relate, cannot connect with it. They just feel that, it's not going to work for me. So what they do is they simply get the data, put it in the spreadsheet, then the spreadsheet becomes an ERP system. And there are going to be at least 100 different ERP systems in the company. And then you have no idea where that data is, whether you are really storing that data or not. And then you are going to get into the data gaps that, okay, you have.
So I like the fact that you went there, that a lot of the tools really don't comprehend the actual processes, because and everybody listening, remember, the actual processes are a reflection of your success. Your business is successful. That's how you got to where you are, right? You come in and bring a commercial tool, and all of a sudden it breaks some of those really good processes or makes them difficult to do. People are just going to do what they do. They're just going to get it out, download it. I like the way you said it, into an Excel spreadsheet and go off and do their thing. Why is that? It's because you've missed a key process. So the tool vendors that are listening, one of the things you really need to do is go understand your clients. These people that want to use your tools, you really need to go understand it. It's one of the reasons, especially ERP tools, are so flexible, and in fact, maybe too flexible, but nonetheless, different businesses are driven by different constraints. And I think it's important to know that. Now, Sam, you got a lot of passion, and I wanted you to come here to talk a bit about ERP. But for a moment, on a personal note, when did you want to know you wanted to start a company and be an evangelist? Would you consider yourself an ERP evangelist or a digital evangelist?
Well, so right now I am positioned as the ERP thought leader in the community. That's how people sort of know me. Sure, the digital is part of it, but it could be all over the place. So I am sort of known as the ERP guy in the community. But it was very recent, to be honest. It's primarily because of COVID that I had to come out of my shell and become the thought leader. Before that, I was too busy, just because people sort of knew me, how to contact, how to find, and I just didn't have to worry about becoming the evangelist or the thought leader. But because of COVID, I really had to come out and really have to establish myself as a thought leader. And honestly speaking, I mean, this has really paid off. Overall from the personal branding perspective, overall from the visibility of the brand. And before this, only, let's say, 1,000 people knew me, but now 1 million people probably know me. So it's yeah.
So this is interesting because, one of the things that it's in the newspaper now is all the supply chain disruptions. And at the end of the day, ERP can help fix this, right? You may still have designed a great product, but you can't produce it because you can't get the parts, whether those are microchips or even raw material, right? So have you seen more clients show up and saying, hey, our supply chain is completely messed up, right? We can't get stuff through the Suez Canal or into Long Beach, and that's if you're shipping them that way. Or you got protocols around the world where you can't ship parts in and out because of concerns about infections. Has that been a part of the benefit to your business? As people are saying, can ERP fix my supply chain problem?
So right now, the way, again, this is coming from our experience, the way we have experienced the market. So the people who are really struggling with the supply chain issues, they are still very manual in their processes, because the majority of the time that they are spending, just because they don't really have their supply chain completely integrated, they don't really have a way to track it down. Okay, where are my vendors? Where are my parts? Which are the parts that are going to have the real risk? So there's a clear divide in the market. There are people who are really struggling, and they are struggling more because they just don't understand that these systems can fix their problems. Okay, and then there is a second aspect of sort of the group. Right. And this group is super smart. They kind of know that, my processes are not really integrated. I know that if I were integrated, then I don't have to spend as much time tracking these parts, finding out what is happening in my supply chain. Where are the real risks? So what can I do to at least minimize the admin time that I am spending as a business, so that I can spend more time making calls, finding out, okay, what can I do to overcome these supply chain issues so that my product is running? I'm able to ship my goods. So there are two camps, I guess. The one who are struggling, they are already struggling more right now, just because they don't know how to solve it, I guess.
Well, and I think there's a third one, right? These guys in industries like the car business, where I retired from, rightly so, managing the money, decreased orders back in March of because of everything that was just an explosion, right? And a terrible disruption. And then a month or a quarter or 6 months later, they said, oh, look at that. Sales didn't go down. In fact, sales are picking up.
Yeah.
And by the time they got back to this, in particular, silicon manufacturers, the silicon manufacturer said, "Oh, well, we got other customers who are putting computers in their homes, and that's driving all kinds of demand, and you'll just have to get in line," right? And so all of a sudden, what was not, it was a really well-oiled ERP machine running with supply chain and so on. It got disrupted because people made what they thought were good decisions about managing the money, only to be surprised that the people responded quicker anyways. And so this silicon manufacturing footprint around the world is now a weak point. It shouldn't be, but it is, because a lot of chips are made in one region of the world.
Yep.
And by the way, it's not Europe or America. It's somewhere else.
Yep.
And that's okay as long as you can ship stuff. But when shipping gets disrupted. So I don't know. This is my example. And I think your examples were good too. People should embrace models, even resource planning models, and ask these kinds of questions about where's the risk? What if the foundries in Southeast Asia are all of a sudden not available, either due to a disease or due to some other kind of disruption?
Yep.
Where are we going to build them? Yep. How fast can we build them? We can stop, and we have for a little bit, producing very profitable products just because we're missing a few chips. I mean, it's kind of insane, right? So I guess, what's your advice to such a world? Is it just modeling, or is it all about, you can't have one resource plan? It seems to me you need multiple resource plans. You need a backup plan. You need a recovery plan and things like that. Yeah. Got anything to add to that? What else could you do to prevent this kind of disruption?
So I like the way you are thinking about the profitability. And if you are purely thinking about the dollars, and I'm more of the finance guy, to be honest. Okay. Now, if you are dealing with these supply chain issues manually, okay, you are adding significant overhead. And the only thing you are doing is you are going to 5 different systems just to find information that should be available on your fingertips. If you had the ERP system or the integration of ERP and PLM implemented in a way it is supposed to be done, then you would not be spending as much time. Now, let's talk about these dollars, okay? So obviously, these people are spending a lot of time. This time could be spent on a lot of different other activities that they could be productive, but no, they are spending time in chasing things that are really, they don't really add any sort of value to the business. So let's talk about some of these models that you were trying to define, right? So it doesn't matter, what kind of models you have. Sometimes if you look at these small to medium-sized manufacturing businesses, sometimes they don't even have their BOMs completely defined or defined the way their manufacturing process should be, to be honest. Okay, that's...
You're right. It's unfortunate, but another thing I caught on some of your resource material was the importance of the e-commerce journey. So let's not talk about resource planning for a moment. Just talk about how somebody orders a thing and then they get it delivered, and it's all through some app on your phone. So this is the beginning of e-commerce. Yeah. What I wanted you to help our audience understand is which e-commerce or ERP?
Well, depending upon the product type, I would say, and depending upon the business model. So, for example, let's say if you are a smaller device, you don't have to have, let's say, the ERP. You could as well sell on, for example, Amazon. You don't even have to have a website, okay? But once you grow to, let's say, you have grown to $5 million on Amazon, and then now you are trying to figure out, okay, how can I go directly to my consumers? What can I do to minimize risk from Amazon? Because when you have just one sales channel, obviously you are running into significant risk, because tomorrow what Amazon could do is they can cut you off completely, or they might increase the product margin that you might not be able to sell on Amazon. And
or they might compete with you, but never mind. That's a whole nother topic.
anything is possible. One thing you could do to protect yourself, again, going back to my financial insight, diversify yourself. When you think about customer channels, the more you diversify, the easier life you are going to have overall. So now let's talk about e-commerce. So let's say if you are producing some kind of parts, they are not necessarily as configurable. Maybe you are serving consumers. If that is the case, you can definitely do e-commerce. Now, do you want to do first e-commerce or do you want to do first ERP? It's really up to you how complex your product is, to be honest. Whether you want to invest first in your direct-to-consumer channel, or do you feel that if you improved your operational efficiency, that is actually going to make you far more competitive overall. If you are running into, let's say, if you have very complex parts, your costing is extremely complex. And let's say if you lose money on one job, then, you could be in trouble. If that is the case, then you definitely have to have an ERP, because, that is actually going to reduce your total lead time for the product that you might be delivering to your customers. It's going to improve the customer experience because you are not going to spend as much time chasing things when customers are knocking your door. Hey, tell me what is the status of my order. And now you go run and go to 5 different systems and then trying to figure out, okay, where's my customer? I have no idea. Then you have a debate inside the company. And finally, by the time customer gets the response, it's already 10 hours. And in the world that we are living in, if you are spending 10 hours in providing answers to the customer, you are already very late.
Right, exactly. So as you've seen manufacturing digital initiatives, right, embracing computers to do more and more of the company's business, what surprises you? What would you share with our listeners to watch out for? What surprises are there?
So I guess I would touch both on the positive and negative. So positive, manufacturing community overall is extremely creative. They are extremely creative, and they were always creative from the product perspective, and that's how they existed in the business. But the same creativity sort of fires back when we look at the business systems, when we look at processes, when we look at standardizing the business. Okay, you don't want to be creative when it comes to process. You want to kill off that creativity. What you want to do is you want to standardize your processes as much as possible. The more you standardize, the more you simplify, the easier it is going to be to implement these systems, the easier overall it is going to be to manage these systems, and the easier it is going to be able to serve your customers. So the biggest surprise I'm going to mention here is going to be the negative, is going to be over creativity. The positive is going to be creativity on the product, which is great, but don't be creative in the process.
Building tools we don't need, right? I get it, right? Well, that's interesting. Sam, it's nice to have a different perspective. And you mentioned you're more focused on the finance side as opposed to maybe specific engineering. That's fine. But I sometimes think that financial focus can be too narrow or even too short term.
Yeah.
I think, these situations we've experienced in the past 18 months have kind of highlighted some of that short term thinking and some of the risks in it. If there's one wish you would have as the e-commerce ERP guy of PLM, what would it be? What is it that we designers and product innovators could do that would make ERP and e-commerce better?
Just one wish overall, I think the systems need to be slightly more integrated. The education around integration need to be there in the community. People need to understand that any of the systems that you are implementing, they could be harder, but if you don't implement them, then you will not be able to grow. So my wish is going to be just spread the awareness of the education. And if I could do that, through my wish, I would do that. That manufacturers definitely need to understand the e-commerce systems, the manufacturing systems slightly better, understand the capabilities, how to implement them successfully is going to be my wish.
Yeah. And your first point today about the vendors don't understand the processes of the customer companies, right? That just makes it even more challenging. It really means the companies need to invest in this. You can't expect to go buy an off-the-shelf solution and it just automatically works. If it does, then chances are you're just duplicating something that somebody else has already done. So, Sam, you're making the time to chat with us. This has been interesting. Thom, I'll hand it back to you.
So thank you. That was a really interesting conversation. So Sam, I want to touch back to something that Craig hit on right at the beginning, and that was when you moved into starting your own business. I think a lot of people who listen at least some of them probably have this idea of, wow, I could have my own consulting business. So what advice do you have for people who work in and around PLM who might have a certain knowledge set, who think, how do I go start my own company? What advice would you have for people who want to follow that path?
So my advice is overall going to be, you might be very good at your own craft, but that typically does not serve anyone, to be honest. Sometimes that fires back, especially with consultants. Obviously, they know a lot. But if you are not able to understand the customers, the way they think, the way their business processes are, if you don't have that depth, if you are not able to connect and relate with them, your business is not going anywhere. So just live the life of a customer. Think from their perspective as much as possible. And the more you do it, obviously the implementation success rate is going to be higher for you. You will grow in your consulting business. So that's going to be my advice for any of the consulting business, that relate and connect with your customer.
So and go and take a look.
Yep,
especially manufacturing. When you go watch a line for 8 hours, you'll see all kinds of things that'll help improve your ERP and the operation. And for you to just read a book or read a memo, that's not good enough. You really should go and see.
I agree.
So if someone is thinking, hey, I'm going to follow that path for my career, I love the idea of thinking like the customer, knowing what the customer's doing. One of the things, though, they have to learn how to do is how to do sales for their business, right?
Yep.
So what are some things that people who might have an engineering background may not be aware of when it comes to selling your services to a client?
Yeah, in my experience, I'm a big fan of cold calling. And the reason why I am such a big fan, and a lot of engineers there might be thinking that, I'm an engineer, how am I going to make that cold call? But the real learning you get about your business, what customers think, what they really need is going to be on those cold calls. So whether you are talking about cold visit to a facility or whether you are talking about making a call, but you need to connect with your prospective customers. If you're simply hanging out with your friends, you are not really building a business that is going to be scalable, especially when we talk about the consulting business. Again, you need to get sales, right? So how can you create that sales model that is going to bring you a lot of leads? And obviously the leads need to go through the entire pipeline. Unless you have confidence in that pipeline, it's going to be very hard for any consultant out there to build their business.
Awesome. Well, Sam, thank you for coming and sharing with us today. And thank you to everybody who tuned in and listened. If it wasn't for the audience, why would Craig and I do this show? But we want you to come back every single week, because every week we have great guests like Sam. And every week, Craig and I have a lot of fun that we hope blends over to you guys. And we're going to bring you thoughts, ideas, and information that are going to help you build your career in and around product lifecycle management. Remember, the Digital Enterprise Society, it is the place for the exchange of ideas around digital manufacturing tools. Go check us out right now at digitalenterprisesociety.org.
You've been listening to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Learn more about what you've heard here today at digitalenterprisesociety.org. Join us again next week for more connection without boundaries and creation without limits.